everybody one round and then start with the second question. So with that, I'll turn it over to the minister.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm going to try to speed through this so we can get through at least one of your questions. And I first off just want to thank Daisy, Sharif, as well as Nina and Addis for joining us today, very strong champions of ethnocultural media. And as you know, if we don't make a regular habit of doing these calls, I get in trouble from them. So I have my own skin in the game to do these. But the truth is we enjoy them, and I think you know that on at least on a weekly basis, we've really trying to make ourselves accessible. So I really appreciate the time you've taken. I appreciate the leadership of my colleagues in making sure that we continue to communicate directly with you, with all the communities of this country. So we announced our plan. It was unveiled and informed by the best medical advice in the country. It enshrines the concept of choice for parents. First off, parents get a choice. The government, a bureaucrat, a politician will not make that decision for you. We believe as progressive conservatives, you're best positioned to make that decision, which is why you get two, to put your child in class in September or to go remote online, but with an improved live synchronous learning experience. If you choose to go online in September, you are also, by a mandate by the ministry, protected and allowed to re-enter your child at least once per semester. Should you want them to go online in September, but maybe in November you want them to go back in class with about a couple weeks notice period, the boards are going to require that. You could have your child go back if you want to take a wait and see approach. The bottom line is we've allowed that option because we know it's fundamentally you're the first educator and you're the parent, and you have your own circumstance at home in the context of maybe living with aging parents, your own personal health circumstances of yourself and your loved ones. The second principle of this plan is we have underscored we will put the money in place to do whatever it takes. The risk is not consistent amongst older high school students and younger elementary students. The emerging evidence is clear that the risk of transmission is higher with older students, particularly in high school. So we'll start with high school students. For students in high school, in higher risk communities like a Toronto or Durham or Peel, or York, where the transmission risk is just higher than maybe it is in other parts of Ontario. Those high schools will start with a adopted or adaptive blended model of 15 children, no more than 15 kids in class per day, either every other week or every other day. And the principle behind that is to reduce the number of kids in class, to maximize distancing, and just to ensure that we don't increase that community spread or that risk for those high school students. Given that the risk is a bit higher based on the advice we have. We, in high schools, will be conducting aggressive surveillance testing. We'll be the only province in Canada by far that has aggressive surveillance testing in place of high school students. And that's really important because that's going to really help us understand where the risks are. It'll allow us to quickly deploy health assets to fix any problems if we see students with asymptomatic students with COVID. And it also allows us to ensure the integrity of our contact tracing system. So this is very unique that we're going to have the ability to do significant surveillance testing for our high school students because of that risk I just suggested based on the public health. We also will have, and I'll speak about some of the broader things, but just specific for high school, we're staggering classes. We're changing the busing. We're changing the start times. We are taking action to introduce limiting the amount of interactions of cohorts, because in high school, as you know, students have more choices. They get to choose their courses. In grade 9, they get one choice. In grade 10, they get two. In grade 11 and 12, they effectively get to choose all their courses, meaning kids could be with a dozen different classes, different teachers, and they could be connected with or in a classroom with hundreds of children in one day. So we've changed the system to quadmestering, meaning opposed to a child taking one course every day for a semester, they're now taking an intensive course up front. It's still the same amount of hours of instruction. We're just changing the delivery to limit the contact with other kids and other educators. And that's really important when it comes to the integrity of the cohort. So we're cohorting the kids, we're staggering the start times, the recesses, staggering bells, and of course, we're changing how we deliver education in high school to achieve that end. And that's been well supported by medical advice. When it comes to elementary school, just so we are clear, we are cohorting the elementary school children. maintaining that individual cohort very strongly. We're not allowing any interactions with outside teachers or even for lunch, for recess. Even then, they're going to be cohorted. It still allows them to be children, but they have to stay together and creating distancing within halls. Ontario compared to BC, for example, the new Democratic government of British Columbia, we have a reduced number of children, indirect amount of kids that they can sort of contact with. The direct and indirect numbers, for example, in high school, in BC is 120, in Ontario it's 100. In elementary school, it is 50, in BC to 60. My point simply is just that even within BC, we have a much reduced cohort number. This is the indirect numbers of kids that maybe if they pass in the hall, like there's a maximum we're imposing on school boards to limit the amount of contact. Even on that basis, we have a reduced number on the cohort. We're well ahead of them. So that's important. In elementary schools, we're also ensuring that we have a significant increase in the number of custodians. Part of our plan is funding $309 million more province-wide, in addition to the $700 million we announced a month ago that I spoke to you about as well then. That $300 million is going towards, in part, hiring more custodians, particularly for elementary school, whereas we know, the touch points need to be cleaned. Kids could, do all types of things in the context of spreading germs, and that's why we're going to have a regular physical presence of 1,300 more custodians hired within our schools to clean these touch points, clean the schools, clean and wipe the desks, the tables, the door handles, everything, the washrooms, consistently and regularly to ensure that the kids are safe. We're also ensuring that there is at least 1 meter of distancing within the class when it comes to the spacing of the desks. In addition to spacing plus masking, which Ontario is the only province to date to mandate masking according to public health advice. The PC government in Alberta has just announced that they went from non-masking to partial masking, and they're moving in the direction of Ontario. The point is we led in this respect because we know that masking plus distancing plus all the other steps we're taking, including cleaning and custodial hiring, is going to really make a big difference. So I just want to unveil some of the investments we made. We put $60 million in to ensure every single educator, EA, as well as every single student gets masks provided. Student masks will be a cloth mask provided at least once a semester based on need. So no child will walk into school without a mask if they can't afford it or they lose it or it breaks. We have procured sufficient supply for a cloth mask for every child in Ontario. We have masks for our educators to keep them safe, and likewise for our supply teachers when they come in to our schools. We set aside $30 million to do more hiring of educators and supervisors, of EAs, because if we think that we need more educators to reduce the numbers in class and ensure that 1 meter of distancing could be achieved, we've set aside $30 million to do that, and we're the only province to do that. We put $50 million in place to hire 500 registered nurses in the public health with training specialized in infection disease prevention. This is unique. The only province in Canada to have a public health element embedded in our education plan. And we feel very strongly about this. We're the only province in Canada that has a proactive public health element literally within our schools. There's no one better to deal with testing, surveillance testing, or screening, or symptom relief than a nurse, respectfully. So that's why we feel it's important to have more of them. To support our educators and likewise to support our principals. So we will do that. We're training those nurses now, and we will have a rapid response team. If we see a flare up in a community, we can deploy resources, 20, 30, 40, whatever the number is, into a community to provide support to those schools, to really lock them down, protect them, help with screening, and particularly going to be useful during the influenza, during the flu season, to know, okay, what's the difference between the sniffles and COVID? And that medical nuance is going to be actually helpful. We shouldn't expect a teacher to be in that position. I wouldn't put them in that position. So having more nurses on site is going to be very important, I believe. In addition, we're putting over $20 million to do testing, aggressive surveillance testing of asymptomatic students. So even if you don't have the symptoms, we're still going to do testing. The swabs we've been able to procure, the soft swabs, they don't go all the way up to the ones that just touch the inside of your nose. They're not invasive. They're not painful. Like, so for any of you who've had a COVID test, it was maybe a little uncomfortable. These ones are not comparatively. But it's the point is we're actually thinking ahead to have that type of consideration for our kids. We've set aside, as I noted, about $75 million, $25 million for more cleaning supplies, to have sanitation, to have millions of liters of hand sanitizer within schools, and likewise $50 million of that 75 to hire 1,300 new custodians. Remember, folks, when we negotiated the deal with our unions, in that deal, just confirmed a couple months ago, we actually funded an additional 1,200 to 1,300 more custodians to be hired, because we knew there's a need for increasing cleaning. This is before COVID. So that plus the $75 million that we just announced last Thursday, brand new money from the budget, to hire an additional, means we're really putting in place over 2,000 frontline cleaners and custodians within our schools, which is not insignificant. That's actually probably the single largest investment for custodial support in Ontario history. And it sets us apart because we're the only province that funded that many by far. $40 million to make sure our buses are clean. That's going to be critical. We know how important it is in the context of busing, because this is going to be a challenge for some kids that are on the bus. We provided medical guidance, 1 child per seat, only 2 kids if they're siblings in the same home, and they're going to be constantly increased cleaning protocols. That's why we put $40 million to have more staff to do the cleaning and more supplies to achieve that. We've also set aside 3 things that were really important. And to be fair, I want to give just a shout out to our caucus colleagues. So, for Addis, for Nina, for Sharif, for Daisy, who've advocated for additional supports in the areas of mental health and special education, given, many constituents in their ridings. And I'll turn to them at the end just for commentary before we open it up. But this was a priority that came from caucus. And to be quite frank, it's a personal priority. We announced $10 million last month for mental health, more money, in addition to $15 million more for technology. But we realize that the effects of being home, the social isolation, the developmental challenges for kids, it's real. And we may have to go further. And I'm letting you know right now, we will continue to do more. If we think we need to hire more psychologists and psychotherapists and social workers, we will do that again. But we announced an additional $10 million, which is by far the highest investment ever in Ontario history in child mental health. That's going to help. These kids will need that access, and they're going to have it. Likewise, for kids on with special education needs, more EAs will be hired to provide more one-on-one support for those children, because I know it's been particularly tough for those families in Ontario. And that provides a bit of context on what we're doing, what we're investing in, how we're changing the delivery, how we're staggering class times, how we're changing the bells, and how we're ensuring cohorting and contact tracing and the integrity of that system, how we're involving public health, and how we're hiring new supports where they're needed to ensure that these kids remain safe. Fundamentally speaking, our government is spending more on a per capita basis than any province in the country, full stop. Like, there's just you cannot compare. And of the biggest provinces, BC and Quebec, none of them have considered, in fact, none of these provinces have considered, respectfully, any public health involvement. So we've got some pretty interesting differentiating elements that I think show that we've been thoughtful. We've followed the advice of SickKids, the Children's Hospital in Ottawa, and other leading pediatric institutions. We have every skin in the game to ensure kids can return with confidence and with safety. The goal is to get to a conventional delivery in those high schools that are starting off on the blended model, meaning we're starting off in those higher risk communities, every other week. We want to get to day-to-day, but the metric that allows us to get there is safety. And if we see continued reduction in transmission, then we'll be able to, in October and beyond, scale up. But we're going to do a very cautious start, especially given the risk is a bit higher in the high school. So there is a variety of new measures. There's public health advice on every expectation laid out. We're providing $10 million to train every single educator, supply teacher, EA, administrator on health and safety protocols, to support them on screening. So when you look at screening, testing, you look at cleaning, when you look at all the areas relevant that every doctor has said you got to do, we are doing it. And I believe other provinces will continue to follow us on masking, because there's a realization, and this as many of you as parents, especially for the young kids, or even for some of the older kids, against the advice, they're still going to potentially come into contact with each other. And I think that realism is important, which is why the mask is there. As you put on a mask if you can't social distance. Well, we're trying to give at least 1 meter of distancing, plus the masking, plus the cleaning, plus everything else will enable these children to return and be safe. Keeping in mind that on the online option, and I know, Sharif's on the line. He is a longstanding advocate for, he just mentioned to us on a call earlier today, just in the context of making sure that the virtual learning is much better than it was. Because in the spring, folks, we had unions in this province opposing live synchronous learning, which I think is totally unacceptable when kids simply just wanted to see their teacher's face, they wanted to learn the curriculum. And as imperfect as it was, they just wanted to be with their friends online. And trust me, they'd rather this than nothing at all. And so we're standing up respectfully to the Teacher Federation to say, our kids deserve this. And so the expectation is if we're paying you, we want to make sure that we're providing the best service possible. And for children that are going to go 100% online in September, we want everyday synchronous live learning. And school boards are developing those plans where the majority of the day is live. Some component could be asynchronous, meaning there could be video content, one-on-ones, things like that. That's our expectation. And I'm going to be making that very clear to the unions publicly and privately that what happened in the spring, how they obstructed and opposed that type of learning, will not happen in September. I will be much more public about my opposition. And I think parents need to as well. But I think right now the time is to work together to collaborate to ensure that the online system is stronger, the in-person system is strong and safe. And of course, the blended option, those higher risk communities, remains viable as well. September 1, we're also allowing childcare operators to scale up to 100% of pre-COVID capacity. It's going to be really important for moms and dads that need childcare. Many of them are opening up every single day. I think we have 200 open up today across the province. There's more childcare centers literally on a daily basis are reopening, which is positive. But the fact is September 1, to align with the school reopening, we're going to have 100% capacity. Childcare operators could have up to 100% of capacity should they want it. Keep in mind, a lot of parents are not sending their children into childcare, so the capacity is not really our limitation right now, but it's there should they need it. And I just want you to know that we are trying to align childcare with schooling, because we know for some parents, having those options are going to be really important. Also, I just want to say we worked very closely with Sick Kids. Dr. Rodney Khan, the CEO, one of the leading pediatric doctors in the world. He and many others at the command table, including the chief medical officer, have supported this plan, believe it is a safe plan, and they recognize that there may be more to do. And I recognize that. And I think I just will conclude saying, before I turn to my caucus colleagues, that we will do whatever it takes. I want to be very clear what that means. If we see further risk, elevated risk, or more evidence that emerges that another step, another action, another layer of prevention needs to be applied, I will not hesitate to announce it, to support it, and to fund it. We just announced over $1 billion essentially for September, 700 originally and $309 million last week. I'm not sure if there's a word to describe it. I think it is robust. But I think we will be there. We will continue to be there. We will do anything required, literally, based on the emerging evidence, based on the advice of the public health and the chief medical officer, to keep kids and staff safe. And so if it requires more cleaning, more staffing, more resources, folks, we will be there for our school boards and for our kids. That's just the bottom line. And I think I've indicated that through the commitment we've made by announcing a significant increase, the largest increase in Canada, according to any province so far. And we have over 8 provinces that made their announcements already. So my instinct is we'll lead in this respect. So with that, I want to just thank you all for this opportunity, and maybe just in the order of who's in front of me for my caucus colleagues. I think the idea was at the end? I'm not sure if it was at the very end. Is that your preference?
That would just
Okay.
be the preference. If we can get through questions and then we have our caucus members speak at the end, that would be great, if that's okay. Yeah.
Sure. Let's do that. Let's do a quick, we'll try to get through the questions and answers quickly. I'll try to keep myself tight, and we'll allow for a few minutes at the end for my colleagues, for sure.
Okay, so your first question will be from Omni. And so we've got Corin Thompson on the line. Corin, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Upeka. Hi, Minister Lecce. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Hey there.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Good to be with you.
Thank you. My question here, it's a little troubling as a parent myself, and just from parents that we've been talking to in the community as of late. spoke with TDSB Chair Robin Pilkey yesterday, and she expressed grave concern. 30 children in kindergarten, but 15 on average for high school students. What's the deal with that? Why would we be putting putting students who are at higher risk? Because if you got a 4-year-old in kindergarten, they're going to be coughing, not the whole covering your mouth kind of thing. What do you say to those parents that they see the least amount of students in high school in a cohort, but you have double the amount in kindergarten?
Well, I think the first thing is to be informed by medical experts in science. The science of every doctor in the country and the world is that the higher level of transmission for students that are older. That's the first principle that I think we just have to accept, because that's what they're telling us. Older students have a higher rate of transmission than younger students, including asymptomatic, and that's not my opinion. It's SICKIDS, and it's CHIOs, the chief medical officers, it's the associate medical officer of health, and many others. So I refer to their evidence to inform why the government made that decision. But just so we're clear on the earliest years, Ontario has the smallest classroom sizes in Canada by far for the earliest years. No province that I'm aware of in those years, certainly not in BC or Quebec, is reducing their classroom sizes, so we're clear. There's not enough consistency. But however, in grade 1s to 3, you used kindergarten as an example. In kindergarten, what is often left out in the discussion is there is 2 staff. There's a 13-to-1 ratio of staff, which doesn't exist in most provinces. Most classes will have, most kindergarten classes will have a higher amount of kids with 1 educator. We have by law, by design, 2 educators in the class. Kindergarten classrooms are much larger. The actual physical square footage and footprint are significantly larger than, say, a grade 7, grade 11, grade 12 class. They're actually designed to be bigger to give more play space for the kids. So they're larger spaces, there's more staffing, and there's going to be more cleaning within those very classrooms. That is a really important element, so I appreciate the question. The other thing is for grade 1 to 3. In grade 1 to 3, Ontario has a cap of 20 students. For 90% of classes, they are capped at 20. There's 10% could go up to 23. We have by far the lowest classroom sizes in those earliest years. And at grade 4 on, as you know, we are masking based on the emerging evidence that age is probably the right age, is age appropriate for them to understand the why are they doing this. And ultimately masking plus 1 meter distancing, plus the cleaning, plus all the other elements we've introduced, including increasing hand hygiene, aggressive cohorting, and screening. Together, we believe these kids could be safe. I mean, when you're adding hundreds of new clean custodians in school, when you're adding public health nurses, when you have additional monies for cleaning and new hygienic practices, when the kids, even in the earliest years, are being cohorted to play together in recess, so there's not contact. I mean, it's not business as usual. This is very much a multitude of actions, layers of prevention we're putting in place, from additional screening to testing to cleaning, that keeps these kids safe. And I think it's been informed by the best medical leaders in Canada to achieve it. So I hope that provides a bit of comfort as a parent, and also, in your capacity as a reporter, that, this was based on science, endorsed by the scientific leaders because of that evidence, because of that research. But as I say, if anything changes along the way, in the context of that advice to us, or in the context of the emerging evidence, we'll respond. And keep in mind, folks, what never gets mentioned for some reason is we put aside $30 million to hire more teachers and more EAs and more ECs to ensure that distancing could be achieved. So if there's a school where that can't be done, we're going to hire another educator, and we're going to reduce that classroom size to ensure there's distancing. So we've actually put in more money to hire more staff to achieve that objective, and that will be important for the early years, where you, as you mentioned, because as you said, they could be a bit of a chaotic experience in some of these classes, and that's okay. But with more staffing in place, it'll help.
Okay, thank you, Karan, for your question. Our next question comes from Mithil Panikkar from Y Media. Mithil, please go ahead.
Hello, Minister. So the plan announced by you and Premier Ford, so it suggests up to 500 public health nurses across, I would say, approximately 5,000 schools. So how do you intend to make that happen?
Yeah, the public health nurses will be supporting training of educators. We've invested $10 million to educate every single educator, every EA, and even the supply teachers, because of course we should rightfully assume there's going to be maybe more more absenteeism, more sick days being used. So the training is going to be critical. The 500 public health nurses, keep in mind, colleagues, there's already public health nurses embedded within your community, within your local health authority. These are specialized for schools to be deployed based on need, where the needs are. Essentially, we're triaging. If we see a flare up in one community, we deploy the resources. If we need to lock down a community, if we have to increase screening because maybe in the broader community, the adults are getting a higher rate of transmission, then we say, okay, look, that's concerning. We need now to really put in more public health nurses to help us with screening. We can deploy those assets. The bottom line is utilizing public health assets based on where those challenges are arising is going to be a huge differentiating strength for the government as we ensure that medical experts are there to provide screening, to provide testing if required, and also to provide symptom relief if a child is, have some of the symptoms of COVID or anything else. And that's going to be really important, especially as we look to the flu season, to differentiate what's your typical cold or flu versus what's COVID. And with respect, I don't think it's fair that educators have to make that choice. I think we need to train them to do the best they can, but to have more public health leaders in our schools to provide a medical opinion, which I think is what parents want.
Okay, thank you, Mithil, for your question. We're moving on to Maria, now from Patrides in the National Ethnic Press Council. Maria, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Hello, Minister.
Hi there.
My question to you is, we're a month away from opening day of school. Parents have a big decision to make, and a lot of them still feel that their boards haven't given them enough information, and I know they're working hard and it's to come. But are there any plans to push back the start of school from September 8th?
No, I think based on the current evidence we have, schools can commence in September. I mean, today's, I think, another day of progress in reducing the level of risk and the number of positive cases. Historic numbers of testing, and I think it's another day under 100 if I saw correctly this morning. So very positive news. The people of this province have made amazing sacrifices. We're all doing our part. We are leading in so many respects around the world. People look to Ontario and Canada as an example. If we're reducing the risk in our communities, we should, and everyone else is going back to work, stage 3 virtually everywhere, every office tower, every manufacturing plant, every small business. I think it is only fair that our children are able to get an education. And school boards are, yes, indeed, they're working hard. They are communicating, though, many of them this week and next, on all the details around the re-entrance, the choices, the deadlines. Many of them have already, in fact, all of them have done surveys with their parents to understand their priorities in the context of busing, in the context of online versus in class. So I think, the next few days, the next week or so are going to be really critical to communication. And just so you know, and that's on the school board, but they are doing it. And we see evidence that they're working to get that information on very quickly. In fact, just yesterday, Toronto passed their plan. So, I mean, the next couple of days, that'll be communicated to the parents in addition to what you maybe read in the news. What we've done in the Ministry of Education, because that's up to the school board, to be fair, like every board has their own plan based on the local risk. But what I've done, and this is an idea that was raised from many parents and many members of our caucus, is to put together a parent guide. Essentially a document that helps parents understand their rights, responsibilities, who, what, where, when, what the heck happens if an outbreak, all these types of things. And this is all, to be fair, we're all learning. I mean, this is a new space for every human on earth. We're all having to adapt. But I feel like there's a lot of information overload for the parents because they're dealing with education. Then they've got to deal with public transit. Then they got to deal with, I think there's a million sectors of the economy that has all these 1,000-page plans. So what I'm trying to do is make it easy, digestible. And even on the Learn at Home website, our parent letter, we have it translated in multitude of languages, and most of those have been posted. As we get the translations, we're putting them online in a variety of languages for large diaspora communities, just to make sure that it's really punching home, not just to the parents, even to the grandparents, because many of them are caregivers. Many of them are involved in the lives of their kids. So all I can say is on our end, we're going to work hard to get that information out to parents and arm them with as much information as possible to make the right decision. And we're going to continue to lean on our school boards, ensure our school boards communicate well. And, listen, Maria, if public health comes to me saying kids ought not to go back on September 1st, well, then the decision is, I think, demonstrated I'll listen to public health. I mean, we closed schools immediately after I got that call from Dr. Williams when he advised that. But right now, especially given the data where we're flattening the curve, I think no, absolutely students should be able to go back. It'll be safer. We're flattening the curve. We're going to look to parents though to really provide as much transparency about their kids. They got to keep them home if they're not well. And I know that that's difficult, but that honesty and having that open discussion, and even within your respective media outlets, is going to be critical, because kids' self-screening process and screening is going to be critical. So parent support is going to be important as we go forward, but know that every step of the way, we're going to continue to provide parent guides, and we'll tweak them as things change, the guidance changes. I think parents will see it as a helpful tool, at least as a starter.
Wonderful. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you for your question. We'll now move on to Shaugat from Notundesh newspaper. Shaugat, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minister. When I was listening to you, I found so many good things, and it is assuring that we don't need to be concerned to send our kids to school. But when we talk to parents, we found that they are highly concerned. So where is the gap actually, what you are doing and what parents are thinking? And my specific question is, what specific plan you are taking for the special needs kids in the school?
Thank you, Shaugat. Well, look, I think parents are nervous because for the first time after their kids have been home for almost 6 months, totally isolated and pretty much safe. Maybe they play with the odd child now, and I don't know if you've allowed your kids to do any sleepovers, but I know for many months the kids were home, and they were. So I get why this is a difficult decision. It is a tough decision. It's nothing to do. I mean, you could remove the plan. This is a tough decision for parents. Full stop. You're putting your child back in school, and I appreciate there's anxiety related to it. And especially when you turn on the news, especially CNN, and you look at some of the news in the United States, how they've reopened schools and how there's been just, a less than perfect reopening. And I'm being very diplomatic, but very troubling to see what's happening in the US. It only amplifies that anxiety. So I don't blame any parent. I'm an uncle. I have 2 nieces in the Catholic education system. I have a lot of skin in the game to ensure the safety of my family, to be quite frank, and all my aunts and cousins are educators, all of them in the Catholic and public system. So, I know how important it is for their families. So I guess what I could say is I appreciate that anxiety exists. I know it comes from a good place. These are parents who love and live for their children. And it's a tough choice, but we've ensured that you have 2 solid options: an online option that will be stronger than what we saw in the past, and an in-person option that will be safe. And that will be responsive to the risk. We will continue to adapt, add new layers of prevention, add more actions, part of our suite of actions to counter this and keep kids safe. And for special education needs, we've added an additional $10 million to hire hundreds of new EAs in the province of Ontario to help those kids. We've asked all IEPs, those are the education plans, to be respected and followed. We've asked school boards to touch base with parents with special needs or kids with exceptionalities before to understand their needs. We've made exceptions for masking because some of them will not be able to wear a mask. But we've also created a program where we were investing money to help transition the kids back from being out of school into school. Because as you will appreciate, behavior and consistency is really important. And for them to go from not going into class to now going to class, that's going to could be a tough transition back, because they like consistency, like to have a bit of a discipline to their day. So we've created a 2-week program to help them transition back into schools. We have more EAs being hired in the province of Ontario. We've increased the special education budget to the highest it's ever been in Ontario history, over $3.1 billion. And obviously there's more funding for technology to help the kids with any type of devices and software that will assist them. Also more mental health money, because often children with special education needs, in many cases, not always, will have mental health adversity. And so hiring more psychologists, psychotherapists, social workers, speech pathologists, together, these things are going to really make a difference for those kids. And I'm not losing sight of the importance of those children, because those parents have had, I mean, all parents have had it tough the last 5 months, 6 months. I feel, my heart is heavy knowing that for many parents, single parents, with a child with special needs, you can't work. It's 24/7. It's a real challenge. It's a blessing, but it also comes with a lot of time, a lot of energy. So I think for those children, having a consistent day-to-day education is key, which is why I've directed, there's no choice here. I've directed every school board, no matter what happens, those kids, adapted, conventional, I don't care, they are required by a mandate to allow the kids in class 5 days a week. Even if you're in an adapted model, there will be exceptions built in for those children. So they have 5 days, they have that consistency that they need. And more investments for behavior and communication supports as well. So, and we're going to keep adding. I speak to a variety of leaders in this community on a fairly regular basis, and we'll continue adopting more ideas and more supports to help them out.
Okay. Thank you. We will now move on to Kathy at the Greek Press. Kathy, please go ahead with your question.
Hello all. Minister, I would like to ask you, what are your thoughts about the rise of the educational COVID pods parents are putting together in order to homeschool their kids?
Sorry, Kathy, what my thoughts on parents choosing to homeschool?
Yeah, with the research that they made days before, there are parents that they put in groups together and they call it COVID pods. This is the name that they have. Right. So, and they trying to make a homeschool for their kids, and they're not willing to bring them back to the school class. So what are your thoughts about these people and what you...
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I'm as a progressive conservative, I believe in respecting parental rights and choices. I'm not going to judge the right of a parent to choose to put their kids online, remote, to engage an educator, a tutor, homeschool. I mean, these are parents' choices fundamentally. Gone are the days of the liberals, of a nanny state where they decide what's best for your child. I believe you know best. And so all I can say is we've provided options for parents to go online or in person. We've even said to boards, you have to allow the parents, even if they choose online in September, a re-entrance point at least once a semester, should they have that choice. Because those parents, Kathy, may choose to do what they're doing now. Maybe they want to go back in school in a couple months. Having that ability will be supported. And I think I'd leave it there. I respect parental choice. All I'm going to do is ensure that the resources are in place for those kids within our schools. And I think we have the capacity, the investments, the resources to support them in schools. I mean, more money for mental health and more money for technology. I mean, we're buying 37,000 more tablets and computers for kids that don't have access to technology. Every high school in the province of Ontario this September, I'm very proud, under this Conservative government, is ensuring that they have high-speed internet. And the latest, next September, for elementary schools, most of them already have it, to be fair, overwhelmingly. But for the few that don't, it'll be done no later than next September for them. We're making major investments to ensure, from an equity perspective, no child is left behind. Every child gets the supports they need. But at the end of the day, I respect their choices.
Okay, we'll move on now to Yuri from Contact Ukrainian TV. Yuri, please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, Minister Lecce. Thank you very much for being with us. And Mr. Sharev Zabawi, champion of cultural media, thank you very much for this opportunity. My question to the minister is, to what extent have the teachers involved in our schooling continued to be paid during this whole period? And how are they contributing to the educational process and the general understanding of all these issues as we try to move forward and then reintegrate the schools coming back in September?
Yeah, thank you, Yuri. I mean, look, I just say, we're going to ensure that for any educator that is immunocompromised, a pre-existing disease, they're safe. And that, to be fair, that's the requirement by law for any worker in the province. And I believe educators should feel safe in the workspace. But if you cannot teach in front of kids because of that, then we expect you to be able to do the online learning, because many kids are going to be doing remote learning in September. And I believe if you all of you who are working harder, and many of the people who read your papers and watch your newscasts and your radio shows are working harder and taking home less in this province. They deserve value for their hard-earned tax dollars. And I'm assuring you that I will fight hard, as I think I have for the last year of the negotiation, to make clear that I want to see value for the taxpayer. So we'll keep you safe, but we're going to expect you to work. You have to do the online learning. And there's actually a way, to be fair, to link up or match up those educators that can't be in a class because of the risk, they can't be near children, to be doing the remote learning. And there's a way we actually could utilize the full complement of our staff. So that's our expectation. We're going to keep them safe, but we're also going to ensure that they deliver value for our kids and that they are ready to start in September.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to Shirley at 51.ca. Shirley, please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Picard. Thank you, Minister. My question is from the community, and we are looking at the TDSB's plan. School will, according to the plan, school will finish at around 1:30 instead of 3 p.m. So people are asking, how do we guarantee the quality of education since the instruction time is reduced? And for the secondary schedule, the half-day in school and half-day remote arrangement is not practical because students would waste more time on their way between school and home. And it seems that quite a lot of parents would still choose for their kids to continue to be at home. So how is the remote learning mode going? How is it improved comparing with it was back in spring? Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Well, what I can say is the Toronto District School Board's plan, essentially, opposed to do the every other day, they did the half-day model, which they are allowed to propose. I appreciate it could be, all of these models come with some challenges logistically about getting to school, etc. But the idea there for Toronto, from what I'm hearing, is they think having a child in a class 5 days a week, even if the amount of hours is reduced, they think that's important from an accountability perspective, and that's the choice they've made. Remember, surely in the higher risk communities like Toronto, most especially, the government, I imposed on them that they cannot have 100% of the kids back in class. I said you have to use the adapted model because the public health is saying they want fewer kids in those classes in the high risk communities, which Toronto, York, Peel, Durham, whatever, Windsor, Essex, these are the communities that fall in there. So they're going to have no more than 15 in class, half a day. The other half is online, the remote learning, led by a teacher. I'm sending out an expectation to answer your second question, and I guess the first question too. What do the kids do on the other half of the day when they're not in class physically? One, they're going to be allowed to study in school, even if they're not physically in a class led by a teacher, meaning they can take their half day. Let's say the afternoon is they're not in class. They can still go to the library or a study hall, work from there, have access to the food programs, the mental health supports, still supervised by, of course, teachers and educators, but they'd be live with their educator on a computer or on the computer lab if they don't have one, doing the live synchronous learning. So the majority of that afternoon will have synchronous components to it. We made it very clear, absolutely clear to the unions and to the school boards. Parents and the government believe if the child cannot be in class, either because they're in the high school, the adapted model, so the half day they're at home, or for the kids they're online 100% of the time, they need to be every single day doing live synchronous learning in front of the teacher with the kids in front of them, learning, challenging, debating, playing, laughing, developing, but ultimately learning is fundamental. So I'm putting out a directive to achieve that. I suspect our unions will not like it, but I think you know where I stand on this, or I have stood on this from the beginning. And the fact that public opinion has come with us and increased, I think has really pressured the unions to accept it. And I'm happy they have. The goal now is to continue to push for as much of that live learning as possible. It'll be much different than the spring, I can assure you. And we're going to continue to push for it to be a lot better than what, to continue to improve each and every week as we go forward, because I just think kids deserve to be learning when they're not in class. And that shouldn't be a controversial comment, but apparently for whatever reason, it is not supported by unions in Ontario. It's just the facts, and they've made their position clear on this.
Okay, the meeting was supposed to end at 2:45. It is now 2:55 almost, and I know the minister does have to leave. So unfortunately, we won't be able to get through everybody's questions. We only have time for one more. However, definitely please send me the questions and I will get the answers for you from the minister and his staff. So our last question, Minister, comes from Tabish at Red FM. Tabish, please go ahead. Are you unmuted? There you are.
Good afternoon, Minister.
Hi there.
So I have a very quick question. If there is a COVID outbreak, so will your government consider to bring in mandatory COVID testing for school staff?
We will follow the public health advice. As Dr. Yaffe said at the announcement, you can test everyone, every teacher in Ontario today. That test is relevant for today. And then you'd have to retest them tomorrow, because if they go to the supermarket, or if their child comes home with playing with friends down the street, it negates the effect of it. But if that is the advice of public health in the future, if it changes, as I noted, we were already putting $23 million in place to do surveillance testing of kids. We will, of course, adjust and expand it to include teachers if that's the advice.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. You know what? If there's one more quick question, if we can all follow Tabish's lead here. That was a quick question, a quick answer.
Okay, the next one on my list is Oxygen TV. So that was Rami. Rami, please go ahead. If it's a quick question.
Yes, thank you very much, Minister Lecce. Actually, are the students of the elementary school allowed to have a blended system day by day, one day to go to school and one day to be online? Or it will be months by months, or I just want the clarification about this point.
Yeah, for the elementary, it's they can go online or they can go in class. There isn't a blended option for the elementary kids. The overwhelming perspective from parents is they wanted their kids to be in class 5 days a week. And so they can choose the remote option and come back to school if they want to go in school later. But there isn't an adapted model that school boards are offering parents, largely because for them, the choice fundamentally is returning full-time or going online full-time. As I noted, parents will be able to return their kids in class if they started online in September.
Week by week or months by month?
Oh, the re-entrance point. Each school board will come up with that plan. I've been very clear to them. They need to have at least once a semester, meaning so you start in September. Let's say you choose, Rami, your child is online in September. I want at least one option for parents. They have to give notice, obviously, to re-enter. I'm making up the period, but in November, for example, and then another re-entrance period in, let's say, February. So that if the parent wants to take a wait-and-see approach, that's their choice. They're guaranteed a spot in a class at the later point. Each school board's making that entry point deadline because it's not all things are equal. Some of them will the dates will be relevant to the community and they'll make that decision. I've just made it clear they don't have a choice. They have to do that.
Okay, thank you, Minister, for taking that question. Very last question is from Nitin Chopra at Prime Asia. Nitin, quick question, please.
Thank you, Pika, for entering this question. Minister, quick question. SRO program was very important, and recently Peel Police halted that program. Any role Education Ministry can play in re-implementing that program before the school starts, or is total gone?
Which program, Nitin?
SRO program, the policing in school.
Oh, those are decisions of school boards, Nitin. I mean, every school board has a decision to make on that. The province, the ministry does not mandate it. Obviously, some are participating in the SOR program. Some, like Peel, have announced they may not in the future. It's really a decision point for local school boards. I'll just say that, at the end of the day, I think there's an important role that our women and men in uniform could play, working closely with schools and communities when it comes to deterring crime. And I'm very proud of the work they do every day to keep us safe. But at the end of the day, it's a decision for the board exclusively. We really have no say in it. And I'll just continue to respect that they'll make the right decision for their community.
Okay, thank you.
if it's possible, I know we're a bit over time here, but I just would love to turn it to my caucus colleagues just to sort of give some perspective from their end, and then we could wrap up. I'm literally going in the order of your screenshot. So Daisy, you're first. Then I've got Sharif, Addis, and Nina in that order. So Daisy, would you like to just provide some comment?
Thank you very much, Minister. And I just want to say thank you for all the media for coming. And I know, I just wanted to make sure that voice it out in your media saying that this is a pandemic. We should all hold our hands together and do this together. Encourage the parents. We understand the challenges that they are facing. We're doing our best to help them. We are here partnering with them. And we want to say thank you to all the teachers. It must be very difficult, especially some will also have to do it online, but let's take all those inconveniences, but knowing that we are doing all these for the best of our next generation. And I really want to compliment Minister Lecce for seeing that health of the children and the safety of the children is the most important thing. This plan that you have included the health expert in this, and I feel a lot comfortable. And I know it is intimidating for all the parents, but let's work together and make this work. And we have to be nimble as much as we can as the things change. This is something we are all learning together. Thank you.
Thank you, MPPY. I think it was Aris.
Yeah,
Sharif. Begin. Sharif. Okay.
Okay, whatever. Sharif, then.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister Lecce, for the amount of information you keep streaming to us, especially today in the caucus meeting, as well as your many sessions with the media. We are trying to deliver our message to the parents. First of all, we need to make sure they understand that we listen, we understand that there is challenges, and we are willing to work with them. The parents are the kind of the most concerned about their kids, and we understand that, and we appreciate that, and we would like to give them the opportunity to have the choices they might need to make them feel comfortable sending their kids, either A, sending them to school, or B, staying, leave them home and proceed with online education. Teachers, we understand there's teachers who would like and pushing for the going back to school, and there's teachers who are afraid and not feeling comfortable to be in front of the kids during this COVID. And we will try to have this the two sides of the house comfortably doing their job. We just ask everybody to cooperate. The school year didn't start yet, and the standoff of teachers started in front of my office. I don't think this is the right message we are expecting. We are in a difficult time by itself, and we are hoping to be able to work in cooperation to serve the kids, to serve the students. This is our most important thing, is to, at the end of the day, serve the community, serve our students. Thank you very much.
All right, Addis, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, colleagues from the ethnic media. It is a great pleasure to see you again and have a chat, even though it is virtual. Minister Lecce, thank you very much for your hard work, your dedication. You are 24/7 on the job, and you and the Premier and the ministers, our main target is the safety and the health of the children, the students. And in extension, when we provide the best care, the best safe reopening of our school, we also safeguard our society, the parents. And I am sure that these type of meetings are very important between the government and the ethnic media, so that you can hear it firsthand from the people who are in charge, like Minister Lecce and other ministers. We had other roundtable discussions, and it is important because we don't want to hear our policies, our government intention through filtered distribution of news items. And I think this is much healthier. This is much appropriate, so that you can also pass the news and the policy directly to our multicultural communities, because the multicultural communities are important in Ontario, especially in the GTHA, where 60% of our population, they receive their news from the ethnic media. And we can assure you that we will not rest until we have a safe opening of the schools without any incidents. Is it challenging times? Of course it is challenging time. This is unprecedented time we are living, not only us, but the entire continent, the entire world. And we will do our best to safeguard the children. And that's why it is important to keep these communication open with us, with the ministers, with the government, with the premier. And my office is open for you 24/7. Whenever you need to reach me, I will give you my own personal cell numbers. You can reach me anytime for any clarification on any help. And thank you very much for all of you for taking the time to participate in this important briefing.
Thanks, Anas. Appreciate that. Nina, please.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Pekka, for setting this up today. But I want to thank all of you for joining us today to discuss this reopening of our schools. And of course, the emphasis is to open with safety being of the utmost importance for our staff, our kids, and of course, our parents. As you've heard today, all decisions have been made with the expert and advice from our scientists and medical experts. We're leading the way to ensure our children are back in class, or if preferred, learning online with significant investments. Premier Ford and Minister Lecce and our entire caucus have listened intently to our educators, parents, and you, the media, and of course our medical experts. But I also want to thank you for doing your part to pass on our message to the communities who are so important to us, and for doing your part, of course, to physically distance. Once again, Minister Lecce, thank you so much for joining and addressing our valued media today. Opeka for setting this up and for arranging such an informative session. And I hope you all have a very good day.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Anas. I really appreciate Sharif as well as Daisy. Thank you all for your work. And thank you all for taking the time. We'll continue to make this, as you know, a regular opportunity, and continue to make sure you get the information I think your parents and your constituents deserve. Just to emphasize, we are spending more than any province in Canada. We're the only province with public health embedded in our schools. Our plan was endorsed by the Chief Medical Officer and Sick Kids in this province. And obviously, I am making it absolutely clear. The remote option, the blended option, and the conventional option is safe, but we will do more and step it up in the resources and investments if required, if public health changes and the situation, for example, gets worse. So with that, I wish you all an amazing day. Thank you again to my caucus colleagues, and I know we'll be seeing each other, I'm sure, next week at this rate. It's like a weekly, I see you guys more than I see my family, okay? So I'm just saying, that's not a good thing, by the way. I'm just saying I see you more than I see my family. But have an amazing day. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Really appreciate your time, Minister and MPPs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleagues.
And once again, anyone who didn't get a question answered, then please do send it in to me and I'll make sure that we get those answered for you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for picking up. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.